There's been a lot of questions about how to set up a reporting system for something that's standards-based. Here at NCPA we use Common Core in our English department, so that's what this is going to be based on. But the idea here is to make this work for any standard system. So you don't have to use Common Core, but the steps should work equally well for any standards-based system. So your first step is to find your standards and read them really carefully. If you don't have a good baseline understanding of your standards, then this is going to be a whole lot trickier. And just sit down, take 20 minutes, read through them, and this will be a lot simpler. For Common Core, I found that there's a really good app for your iPhone or your iPad. It's called Core, and it makes the Common Core a lot simpler than the websites that I was reading it from, and it's a bit more systematic. So if you're having a hard time with Common Core, I definitely recommend checking out Core. It's free, and it's very, very easy to use. What I like about Common Core for this is that it already breaks the standards down into strands or reportables, or the things you put on your report card under your class topic. So for English, we use reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language targets. Those are our 4 reportables for English. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on. Your subject may be a little different, but I think it's fairly applicable across the board. When we did ours, we had to tweak Common Core a little bit. We had to add a few things to make it a little more applicable to our student population. We teach EAL students, Chinese nationals, who have slightly different needs than what the Common Core entails. So we did add a few language targets that weren't there. No big deal, and the system's flexible enough that you can do that. The next part is actually the part that took the most thought. The language of standards is often not very kid-friendly, and it's not conducive to plugging into a classroom system automatically. So what I did is I went through all the standards and I turned them into language that the kids can easily understand, and also language that we can use in the classrooms in the form of we can statements. You might use I can statements, same idea. So I made this large bank of every standard turned into a we can statement. I also found that some were repetitive, so I condensed a few and changed the wording a little bit, basically to make it as simple of a document as possible for teachers and students to use. That was the key here, making this the most useful thing. So now we have this bank of we can statements for each strand and for all of the standards. And that can be used by any teacher in the department, and it homogenizes the whole idea. So all of us are working from the same baseline. The next step was to find student proficiency samples for each of the we can statements. You can do this from previous student work that you find that meets your idea of proficiency as a department, which you have to talk about and agree on. So you need to have a meeting about these. Or you can come up with and create your own samples as each assignment comes along, depending on what works best for you. I've done a combination of both things, and as long as the students have some sort of model of proficiency, it doesn't seem to matter where it comes from, whether it's prior student work or something that you create with the class as a model text. The next really important step is to create strand charts for each of your classes. Basically what you do is you take the strands, and then all the we can statements go on top in a horizontal row. Students' names go on a vertical column to the left, and then you've got yourself a checklist. And that's what I've got here are all my we can statement checklists for each strand. So we've got speaking, language targets, writing, the second page of writing, because there's a lot of writing ones, and then you've got the reading targets as well. So this step takes a little bit of time, but once you have it done, you've got a clipboard for each of your classes. And from there, any assignment that comes in, you now have an easy way to enter the data that you need. When you're planning your units or lessons or assessments or activities, you now have that big list of weekend statements to draw on. And while you're doing it, it's pretty simple to either, if you want to go at it from a totally backwards design strategy, you can pick which weekend statements we're going to use and then design the assessments around that. That's totally fine. If you're kind of coming at this in more of a hybrid way, you can know which assessments you're doing and then find which weekend statements are appropriate for that. And then you just list them right on the lesson plan. I'm going to show an example of that in the video. And once you have it listed in the lesson plan and unit plan, it makes the assessment forms really easy to create. What I find is working really well are weekend statement self-assessment forms and teacher assessment forms. So all you do is you go back to your lesson plan where you've written down the weekend statements and copy and paste that into a little table. And it's a 3-column table. The first is the weekend statement. The second is the self-assessment, which the student gives himself a mark on. We use a 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 is proficient, 4 is exemplary, 2 is approaching. So they give themselves a mark based on how they feel they did on that weekend statement. And the third column is where we, as teachers, give our mark. And I find that this makes the process a lot simpler. I can give a mark for each weekend statement, or if I agree with them, I can just have the same mark as them. But if I find that there's a disagreement, then it helps for me to explain to them why there's a disagreement in that third column. One thing that really helps when you're creating your self-assessment forms is that you put them in the order that they are on your chart. That way it's much easier and faster to transfer through from the weekend statement self-assessment form to your Strand charts that you have on your clipboard. Once you have the assignment graded based on the weekend statements, it's an easy step to put it in your charts. So you just take the chart and the weekend statement assessment form and you fill in the numbers. And then, you have your charts all filled out with the first few things. And from there, you can really get into differentiation a lot easier because you can see where the students are struggling with. So if I'm looking at a language target like we can use appropriate verb tense, and I know that several of the students are still at a 1 or 2 level, I can focus in on them. We can do strategy groups, we can do individual language targets for a written assignment or a speaking assignment and have them just focus on that. You can do all sorts of different ways to help them once you have those first initial assessments and you know where they're strong and where they're weak. When it comes to report card time, or just anytime you want to give the students feedback at any point, it's now a much more transparent and simple process with these charts. The way we've decided is that you're not proficient in a strand unless you're proficient in all the standards, all the weekend statements. And you're not proficient in the class until you're proficient in all the strands. To us, at our school, and you guys might decide something different, a student's not proficient until they're proficient in everything. They're still approaching if they still have areas that they're not proficient. So they're still a 2, as we would say, approaching. And if you want to give feedback, you can just show them straight down the column, this is what you need to do to improve so that you're a proficient in this strand or this standard. And because it's so specific, it's really easy to give that feedback. Just walk to the desk, tell them, okay, here you are on this, and you give them the feedback. To keep organized, I've created a little system. If you look at my charts, you can see the class over here. This is 10E. You can go by letter blocks. But I also have this little piece of paper up here that I marked with the blue marker. And the blue marker paper goes with my folder system behind me over here, which I'm going to show you in a second. And in the folder system, each of the classes gets a different color. And because each class gets a different color, then I put that color over here on the clipboard. And that makes it easy for me to find the one that I want. I just turn around and I go, okay, this one is blue, and I look for the blue one, and there I have it. And it keeps my desk from getting cluttered, and it keeps it nice and organized and in easy reach behind me. One final thing on a way to think about standards-based reporting that was hard for us to understand. The thing that really made it click into place in our training was when the person providing the training said that proficiency, the level of proficiency should be like getting A's in a more traditional grading system. Basically, if you are getting 3s across the board, that's like a 4.0 GPA. So that made us a lot more comfortable with the idea of what a 3 is. So if you're approaching, you're not there yet. And you know, that's why it's really important to have those examples of proficiency for the students to look at. So they have a really clear idea of the level that they need to aim at. And you know, I think that this is a good system. I think it gives really detailed feedback, and I hope that with this step-by-step guide, you too can set up your own standards-based reporting system. And I hope it helps your students learn and grow. Thanks for watching.